Welcome, traveler. Today we are going to transform Dark Souls characters into Magic the Gathering Legends. And what better character to start this series from if not Gwyn, the individual that shaped the Dark Souls universe. This is it. If you're interested, come take a peek into the cauldron. When I mention Gwyn, this is probably the image that pops on your mind. A husk, the remains of a god with no soul. He wants you to rekindle the fire, yet his remains fight you, certainly not of his own volition. This mindless zombie wouldn't make for an interesting card. Instead, we'll be taking Gwyn on his prime. Thus, his name will be Lord of Sunlight, Overlord of Cinders, his hollow state. Which slice of the color pie should Gwyn fit into is probably the most important question we need to answer. Gwyn, for sure, belongs to white, for both his powers and actions. To preserve the legacy he built, he goes as far as to sacrifice his own life. He wanted to create a world as good as possible for its kin. He employed rigid laws and enforced them ruthlessly, even on his own son, going as far as stripping him of his very name. And last but not least, constructed an entire religion, the Way of White, meant to worship him and the other gods of Anor Londo. On the other hand, Gwyn can't be blue. He doesn't seek to improve the ecosystem he lives in, but to keep it in a state of stillness. He fears change and has no interest in giving individuals means to shape themselves in anything other than what he wants them to be. No one would argue against Black describing Gwyn. He has no shame sacrificing innocent lives to preserve his empire, manipulating facts to shape people's beliefs, and doesn't shy away of using curses to achieve his goals. Red may be perhaps the most controversial color, because while it's the color of lightning in Magic, Gwyn's signature miracle, that's all they have in common. The only emotion that may have overpowered is called judgment, or hatred for the dragons and fear of the dark. The first is shared between Black and Red, while the second is purely Black. He also firmly establishes order, which Red despises, and has no interest in freedom as a value, Red's key aspect. On this basis, I believe he shouldn't be Red. We can easily cut him off green. He opposes with all his might against the natural circle of fire and dark, not accepting nature as it is, and never relies on instinct, but on pondered strategic schemes. In the end, he'll be in ores of colors. To transcribe his abilities into magic, I decided to make him a saga. Each chapter describing his deeds, ending with his sacrifice during the last chapter. He has to be an enchantment creature for technical reasons, since Saga is a type that can only be applied to enchantments. Unlike Theros gods though, he doesn't draw power from people's worship, so he needs no devotion to be a creature. He will be a 4-mana 5/5, has high stats for a non-green creature, but it is justified due to his self-sacrificing saga nature. The first chapter represents the Age of Fire. During this chapter, all your creatures will be empowered by a strong Anthem effect, giving them +2/+2, lifelink, and vigilance. I thought about giving him a Dragon Hate type effect to represent his hatred towards them, but ultimately decided against it, because gameplay-wise having a tribal hate effect in the command zone isn't a fun build around. The second chapter represents the fading of the flames. the anthem effect of a previous fire is lost, and the whole board is affected by the foreshadowing of the Age of Dark. All creatures, including Gwyn himself, get -3/-3, and creatures of your opponents that die during this chapter, due to any effect, not just this one, are exiled. While being a powerful ability, it comes as the second chapter, giving your opponents that rely on small creatures the time to answer the saga before their board is exiled, so it doesn't feel as oppressive. It also makes harder to build around Gwyn's first ability, since your creatures are also gonna be affected by the negative stat line and won't get exiled, which is a downside. You'll find out why in the next chapter. Here's Gwyn's sacrifice to rekindle the flame. The fading of the flame goes away, and so does he, and it is at this moment that the curse of undeath manifests itself, resurrecting on your side all creatures branded with the dark sign, ready to do your bidding to prolong the Age of Fire endlessly. While this is a very undercosted Grief Betrayal effect, it is also heavily telegraphed. Your opponents can see it happening from a mile away and will try to stop your curse from grasping their creatures. You'll need to use the rest of your deck to make sure Gwyn's plan goes unhindered. The most rule-savvy of you will have already seen a big issue with this card. Due to the cruel luring of sagas, this card would be a mess, since only the last chapter would function, while the first two would never end. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a clean way to make the card work as intended, following the current rulebook, so I came up with this ability called Legacy. Like Read Ahead, it modifies how a saga functions. It makes so that Chapter 1 static ability applies only for as long as Gwyn has one lore counter, the second ability only when he has 2, and the last ability when he has 3. It's very intuitive and prevents the card from looking like this. Now, I would hate stifling your creativity by giving you a sample list. Instead, I'm gonna suggest some key cards that will work well with Gwyn and in which direction you can build your deck. A card that I foresee belonging in any Gwyn deck has to be the Power Conduit, a low CMC artifact that you can tap to remove any kind of counter from a permanent you control, to put a charge counter on an artifact, or a +1/+1 counter on a creature. The perfect tool to manipulate chapters at instant speed. Hex Parasite and Fame Broker can operate the same way, but at the downside of risking to die to the second chapter. You'll require anthem effects or other tricks to keep them alive. Coalition Relic and Component Pouch are good mana rocks that synergize well with your counter manipulation shenanigans. In a similar way, Tome of Legends can be a solid draw engine working with Gwyn entering, attacking, and other counters synergy. Gwyn will eventually die due to his saga nature. Using reanimation effects can help you circumvent his ever-increasing mana cost, especially if you go for a slower control build based on enchantments. Cards like Animate Undead, Necromancy, and Elspeth Conquers Death can really come in handy to keep the Curse of Undeath rolling. Probably the best card for such a type of deck would be Starfield of Nyx, able to repeatedly bring back your commander, and if you time it right, you may be able to animate all your enchantments during the Age of Fire, to swing at your opponents and gain a bunch of life. In a blink-focused strategy, cards like Ephemerate and Restoration Angel can delay the third chapter and keep the Age of Fire from ever withering. While perhaps the most powerful of these effects belongs to Eldrazi Displacer. While being a 3/3 makes it die to the Age of Dark, a single +1/+1 counter is enough to keep him alive through it, and will allow at instant speed to reset Gwyn's whenever you need to. This was just the beginning of the series. If you enjoyed this episode and want to see more, please consider liking and subscribing. Leave a comment to let me know which character you want to see next. This was Eve. Thanks for watching.